Patrick Hoops from the Carlton Footy Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
James Walker here from the Brisbane Lions.
Jason Johannisen from the Western Bulldogs.
Luke Parker here from the Sydney Swans.
It's Roy Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Potentially for you, your fantasy season is over. Not like Adelaide's season where it's over before it's over, but like you're eliminated from your leagues. You are done with your overall rankings. Maybe a year is done, or perhaps you are becoming like the Tigers of old, where they are up and about, looking good, firing. And look, there is plenty of fantasy stuff to talk about still with just the 3 weeks to go. Hello, it is MJ from the Coaches Panel. I've got the Fox in here with me. Hello, mate. I should turn your mic on, shouldn't I?
Yeah, hey, MJ. Yeah, look, we're up. The Tigers are up.
Yes, they are, as are your SuperCoach side, doing very nice things.
Only got 6 more at the G.
Yeah, it's true, actually. What was it? Ended up being 10 in a row for the flag. So, which is a nice little run through there for the Tigers. But
they're doing all right.
I think they're the favourite, just between you and me. Them and the Eagles and Brizzy are the three that look very difficult to beat. And then GWS on their day are a very good side.
Eagles.
Yeah,
Eagles Tigers.
I'd love an Eagles Tigers grand final. I think that'd be a ripping grand final.
There'll be no sheet from the pocket on that day.
I tell you what, your heart would be broken and torn in two if you did that again.
I wouldn't know what to do.
No, you wouldn't. That's all right. Look, man, there is a fair bit I still want to get through. I do want to look at some guys that are primed for a 3 big week run home. People, whether it be going for a league positioning, a semi-final this week, or find themselves with an extra week off, there's an opportunity to have some conversations about. There are some Patreons that have got some questions for us. Of course, if you love what you've got from the Coaches Panel so far in 2019 and want to support us as we head into 2020 and the trade period, well, the good news is you can do that over at patreon.com/Coaches Panel. But I think, Fox, the main thing I want to talk about is some of the lessons that either we've learned or we've observed from the 2019 season, because it is getting to the point of the year that, look, there's not really many trades left for Dream Teamers and Super Coaches. You've got maybe 2. Like maybe 2. If you've got any more than that, you've probably been a little too conservative, unless leagues is your primary focus. Then I could maybe understand that a little more. But I suppose there's a player like Toby Green, who at the moment is the most informed forward, yet across all your formats is barely owned by around that 10% marker. That gives us that indication that we're at the time of the year that unless you get an injury-forced trade, you probably don't have a trade to use.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the one, isn't he, Toby Green? 10%. You'd like him in your team at the moment.
Yeah, it is. And it was someone we spoke about a couple of weeks ago on the panel podcast when Stephen Cornelio was out injured. We looked at, the popular guys to get, the low ownership guys to get, the guys with big ceilings. The standout and real obvious candidate was a Toby Green. But before we talk any more so about guys that are great pickups in these final 3 weeks, let's talk about some of the lessons we've learned in 2019. Let's get a little retrospective, but not just for the sake of lamenting on missed opportunities in the year or failed decisions. There's learnings we can have as we move forward as fantasy coaches into 2020 and beyond. What about for you, Fox? Was there either a mistake, either being a selection or a mistake by missing a selection, that you've noticed when it's come to the 2019 season?
Yeah, we all make mistakes. Even the winner, it's who makes the least mistakes.
That's
pretty much,
true, yes.
Because I think everyone's going to make mistakes.
Well, we've had some friends and supporters of the Coaches Panel that have won, formats of the game before, and they'd say, yeah, I still made some fairly big blunders in the year. It's just I also got ahead of the bell curve, with a couple of unique guys before everyone else jumped on them. So is there one that rings true for you right at the top?
I've got plenty.
Okay. Well,
how long's this podcast going for?
We don't want to go full emo on it, mate.
Right. Well, I'll start with probably the first one. Collingwood played early. 6 of the first 7 rounds they played early. They played that
Thursday or Friday night game, yeah.
And the obvious thing would be to have probably a Treloar or a Grundy, one if not both. I had none of them.
Yeah, well, and that's something I do want to talk about in a sec, but someone like a Brodie Grundy, really outside of 2 or 3 weeks, and one of them was the first round of the year, he's put together a faultless fantasy footy season, and choosing to go against him has certainly put coaches on the back foot. It's safe to say. Now, there was avenues and ways to navigate their way through it.
He came in with that sore toe, didn't he? So, but I think I should have had Trelaw. I think
one of those two.
You know, I'm not saying you have both. I think you should have had one as a cover for that. You know, for that loophole, for that VC.
Yeah, and that's especially important for Dream Teamers, where it's the first year they've had the rolling vice captaincy option. SuperCoach is years deep into it, so you're much more experienced at using it. And AFL Fantasy, because they did, I think it was their first 6 or 7 games involved them on a Thursday night, there was that vice captaincy option that normally you don't get to maximise through there. So I definitely think, it's a nice little learning. And more so, to put it into a 2020 perspective, would be then if there are sides that have multiple Thursday night or Friday night, those early round games over that first 6 to 8 weeks, use that as that strategy option, more so for premiums than it is for rookies than anything else. That's there. For me, there was one real big missed opportunity, and that was I hesitated to start with Travis Boak. And that was a misstep, purely because the writing was there on the wall, but I let history previously dictate that he wouldn't retain that role. But in the clear light of day, it was obvious. He was training with the midfield group once again. He said he was going to play midfield all year. Ken Hinkley, all preseason, said, I'm going to play Boak in the midfield. He was given both JLT games purely in the midfield. He played the intra-club match purely in the midfield. Ollie Wines got injured, so if there was ever any doubt or concern about his midfield role, with Wines being out for the first month, it was staring us all in the face. But if you look at his ownership numbers from round one, a lot of coaches made that mistake too, where they didn't think he'd be that good to be a keeper, 90-plus, season-long, top 6, top 8, top 10 forward. And for those that jumped on him, well done. You got a unique, and, man, you got some great scores on the way.
Yeah, they're the guys you really need to jump on it. And if they're going, you got to get on them quick.
Yep.
Don't you? Because you end up having to buy them, but at a much greater price.
Yep.
And there's your dollar value gone.
Yeah, absolutely. What about for you? Some other lessons that either you've had or you've observed other coaches may have made?
If we're going along that line of Boak,
sure.
You could also add in Sheed early.
Okay, starting Sheed and then
Sheed,
pivoting away, yes.
That would have been a good choice. Those uniques, because I don't think he would have been overly...
I think his AFL fantasy ownership numbers would have been higher early, and then after those, flew out of the gate the first 2 or 3 weeks, right. Everyone jumped on, and then he struggled to find his role in the midfield with Gaff coming back in, and then all of a sudden, now he's solid. He's certainly not, premium territory right now, but he's very, very solid for us.
I'll throw in another one. He might be more unique. Caleb Daniel.
Oh yeah,
that
nice.
would have been a guy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, especially in SuperCoach. To start with him, yeah.
So you only need 2 or 3 of those unique-ish type of guys to get a great head start.
And it is that difficult thing. Like you think of Caleb Daniel all preseason again. He was talked about a lot of playing down back and being that key ball distribution option coming off half back for the Bulldogs. I also don't think anyone would have predicted that he'd average what he did pre his first hamstring injury, where he was a top 6 forward for us in SuperCoach, top 10 in Dream Team, and then AFL Fantasy. Well, by gaining defensive eligibility, he became so important, especially if you're a Chris Burgess owner, and to be able to flip both of those buys around, from forward and back. But it's also one of those ones where you go, no one probably thought he'd be this big. Great if you did, but not many would have picked.
Well, in keeper leagues, you could have got him for
redraft.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have been holding him.
Exactly.
And now all of a sudden he'll probably be your D1, if not your D2. Next year in keeper leagues, he was very, very good.
And probably later in the year, Marshall.
Yeah, well, that was the thing is the Saints started with the Billy Longer, didn't they? And then they very quickly moved to a Rowan Marshall. And the hesitancy of coaches to probably think, when is he going to come up against a good opponent? When is he going to, maybe get replaced out for longer? But he's done incredibly well. You're right. This is one of those guys that if you nailed that pick ahead of the bell curve, ahead of everybody else jumping on, those are the moves that you make that win you the season, is your 2 to 3 weeks of scores ahead of everybody else. It's the equivalent of starting with maybe it's more obvious than a Rowan Marshall, but starting with a Tim Taranto across the formats. The moment Cal Ward's year was done, it got further cemented early on. And again, no one likes to see injuries, but injuries create opportunities. Taranto was always going to get a lot of midfield time, but he's been one of those success stories for coaches so far in 2019. He looks to be one of the next uber elite premium options for us. I know the last weekend wasn't great, especially if you captained him. But he was one of those really big wins. I know we're talking a little bit about missteps, but it's similar logic to Boak, wasn't it? In terms of all the signs pointed to it. It just needed a little bit of courage, maybe for some coaches to go, look, he's going to be the pick for me through there. Any others for you?
Well, the same as rookies, missing rookies like the
Sydney Stack. He's an interesting one, wasn't he? Because
he is. He came in at an awkward time. I don't know why but it was awkward.
Yeah, it was that game up against GWS. Jaden Short's injury probably cemented his role in the side.
Yeah.
But he was in anyway with Short,
and not thinking he may not have had the fitness to go however many rounds. Like he just kept going and going. It's like a Duracell battery. Just going and going. Yeah, we probably thought, me as a Richmond supporter, probably thought he was going to get a taste.
Yeah, you might get two or three, like a Patrick Naish. Get 2 or 3 weeks and you're done.
And you don't want those guys sitting on your bench for half the year, especially, in SuperCoach.
In the limited trade formats, if you get these guys and you get the one price rise and then you just hold them. Like for those that jumped on, I know the past month has been good, but say like a Rowbottom from Sydney who was just sitting there on the bench doing nothing for 6 weeks. And you're like, come on, mate. Come on. Anytime that can certainly happen to us as a fantasy coach where we just sit there waiting, hoping and wishing that a player will return and then just not getting them.
Yeah, like you could have missed Stack and then went for Naish. Naish,
same thing. Yeah.
Well, he only went for 3. Did he get 3 weeks?
I think he got 3 weeks and that was it. It's kind of those that were sitting with Bailey Scott. Came out with that 97 in AFL Fantasy, similar enough in SuperCoach. Then a couple of quieter games, missed a week, had a game. And then we just haven't seen him since. Like those kind of players, like he's crazily still in 13% of AFL fantasy sides, which tells you how many people just either have chosen to throw away that spot or are just not active anymore in that format. But it is one of those moves for coaches that you've got to be careful of and understand the hesitancy too around that move. I think, the flip side of it is probably one of, if not the best cash cow for us. I know Sam Walsh probably ultimately was, and there was some criticism that we got earlier in the year where people said, oh, we told you not to get him. Well, we never said don't get him. It was, if you're going to spend the extra cash on him, because yes, he's probably got the best job security of all our cash cows, is to make that worthwhile, you needed him to outscore by a decent amount other cash cows like a Charlie Constable. Yeah. And he did that. Well and truly has he done that. Yeah. And that's just an understanding of, to generate the same amount of cash, you needed him to outscore those at a lower price point, and he did that. And well done to every single coach, and a large portion of the fantasy community got on him. The only other cash cow that's probably really worth talking about that would have been a misstep for coaches is not maximising the opportunity with Riley O'Brien.
Oh, absolutely.
And isn't it an interesting one? We knew he'd get 6 to 8 weeks with the Sam Jacobs injury. Again, nobody predicted him to be this good. But again, it's that misstep. In terms of cash generation, even if you had Grundy and Gawn, it was worth getting rid of a wasted R3.
Yeah. And you got to work, what trade did you do on that week? Like it could have been someone getting injured. You don't know what that trade was.
Sidewaysing a Dunkley, who was an underperformer at the start of the year.
That could have been the trade that week.
That people did instead of.
And now, looking back in hindsight, you're shaking your head because he's made, in SuperCoach, he's made $395K as we speak.
It's a crazy amount of money. Again, to use AFL Fantasy an example, right now, you would make money from an O'Brien to Gawn trade.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Like it's simply ridiculous. I think other mistakes we may have made at some point during the year was starting a Rory Laird, unknowing what the Milleret and Smith combination would do, and instead the right choice would have been starting Lockie Whitfield, who again has had his own problems during the year with injuries. But if you started him, you would have got those great scores out of the gate. You wouldn't have had those. Now, Laird's been solid. Last week he was very, very good, but Laird's certainly not been, the 110, the 105 average that people might have hoped he's been. He's still been a very, very good defender. He just wasn't at that peak price, the option.
Whitfield over Laird would have been quite a few numbers, wouldn't it? Points.
Yeah. No, it certainly would have been. Missing Lockie Neal in SuperCoach at Brisbane. Again, I still maintain that I don't think Neal has shown enough to be in a dream team or AFL Fantasy, 110 elite guy consistently. Even at Brisbane now, that's proven to be the case. Different in SuperCoach, given what he can do. But we are seeing these guys. These are some of the decisions that would have made or cost your fantasy season. Again, there's luck along the way. Trading in Gaff early, when he was on the bubble, was the right time to go and get him.
Maybe Sheed to Gaff.
Yeah, Sheed to Gaff would have been an awesome move to be able to go and do that. Jumping on Basher Hooley during his 6-week run when he was on a tear. I know he's been good in the past couple of weeks too. Was the right move. But there's others that have been awesome for us, or maybe awesome's a slight overstatement, but like a Jack Billings has delivered for us in 2019. He's averaging right now 100 in Dream Team, which is an AFL Fantasy, which is just absolutely awesome given what we were going to be paying for him. In SuperCoach, he's also just missing that 100 average at 96.6, so he was a guy that we were paying an 80 for and was much maligned, and yet he's a top 10 forward for us.
He started slow.
He started. I wouldn't say started slow.
I think he started off really well.
He did start off pretty well. He started off in SuperCoach. It was quieter than it was in Dream Team and Fantasy. His start of the year in SuperCoach was 88, 84, 108, 126, 93. So that was his first 5. A quiet couple of weeks. And then he's found a little bit more ceiling over the past couple. While in Dream Team and AFL Fantasy, again, he was one of those great AFL Fantasy picks to kind of start the year. He came out with an 84, a 94, a 108, a 124, a 105, and an 87. Now, he's had some bigger games and some bigger ceilings, kind of post buy round. He hasn't dropped under 85 in Dream Team or AFL Fantasy, including that huge 170. And he's had just the one score under 76 since the multi-buy round. In fact, only the 3 scores under 100 since coming back off round 12.
He definitely played a few early forward, didn't he?
He did that bit more
Richo
split.
sort of had him in that.
The mid-forward split was there. It was still well enough to score, but really since coming off the multi-buy rounds, he's played almost, 80% wing. And look, it'll be something I want to talk about on future podcast episodes, is guys that we think are going to lose and guys that we think are going to gain DPP. I think it's pretty safe to say Billings is probably going to lose it. Although he does look a lot happier. He does look happier. Isn't it nice that a contract year can just turn him into an absolute superstar of a player? Any other glaring ones that we want to spend some time talking about that you feel are there?
How many pages do you want?
Well, maybe
MJ?
give me one last big one. Because again, you don't want to look like a hindsight fool where you just go, oh, hindsight do this, hindsight do that. It was more, no. This was
all right.
This is a misstep that I need to learn from. I'm going to
throw one out that I've made a couple of mistakes on it.
Okay.
435.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I believe you might be talking about the type of game on a Saturday.
Yeah.
That if you're not careful of when...
Now, I haven't discussed this with you, but you've hit it
it's
right
where
on the head. It's an awkward game.
It's an awkward game because you're trying to... Friday night, you get your opportunities, you can move it. You're talking more for rolling lockout formats of SuperCoach and Dream Team.
Just be careful where your E's and your VCs and your C's are.
Because otherwise, you might nail the vice captaincy call.
Yep.
But you can't maximise it. Or you need to make a trade, and all of a sudden, a player's locked away with those 150 and 210 games.
It's a sneaky time.
It's a
very
really difficult time because by the time you get the final teams, you're about halfway through the early game.
Yeah.
You know, a third of the way through the second game. If you're not careful, that's where you get stung, isn't it?
So the best thing to do is take your emergencies off and maybe put your captain and VC on to people later in the round.
Yep.
Just not to muck up. You know, just because I got hit bad once. I think Grundy went huge. I had the VC on him, and I got done. I think I took a very low score.
If we were to create a list of like the 10 most frustrating things that can happen to a fantasy footy coach, that's pretty high up there. I know, like getting a captaincy, scoring a 0, #Canelio a few weeks ago, like that's frustrating. But I feel like having the opportunity to loop at an incredible vice captaincy score and missing it, that belongs on the top 10 list of greatest frustrations for a fantasy coach.
Absolutely.
It's a tricky
one. You got
one.
Plenty of hair that you can pull out.
Oh, at the moment I do. But, you know, we'll see how long that lasts in my life. Just for your reference, Fox, and for everybody else's, the 4:35 game this week, Brisbane and Gold Coast. Next week after that is Adelaide and Collingwood. That's a trouble one for you right there, mate. That's the one that's going to do you in. And then the final round, Geelong take on Collingwood.
I need, like, notifications, like, sort of... But actually, Saturday's really busy for me. It's just really...
That's the thing
it's really awkward.
For some people, and that was maybe some of the kickback that's been amongst some in the Dream Team community and still amongst the AFL fantasy community, it's certainly there that the rolling lockout rewards those who have the opportunities to get access to their mobile phone and make the changes. It doesn't, quote, reward people that have a lot on a Saturday. And that's, you know, there's merit to that argument to some degree. But
and Gil's probably got a few more things on his mind at the moment.
Gil couldn't give two stuffs about fantasy footy, let's be honest.
Approach him on the 4:35, you know, that changing that time.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. That's perfect for Fox footy to be able to roll out a secondary game. All right, well, there's a couple of things that have maybe been mistakes either Fox or I that we've made, maybe the ones that you've made that have sent in with us. There's certainly some things that you could learn from 2019 and next week. One of the things we will talk about is gaining and losing DPP players for 2020. Yes, the attention is starting to move there for simple reasons. If your focus is overall rankings, and chances are if you're not in the top, 20 to 50, you ain't no chance, like across the formats as a general summation. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to get your overall best ever ranking, but in terms of winning it all, and then for leagues, you're in a do-or-die matchup this week in your semi-final, or you got the week off, or you're done. And so it does start to get, in AFL Fantasy, you got 2 trades left this week. Probably in that format, Fox, you're just playing fixture trades now, aren't you, more than anything else?
Yeah, you could be in the consolation finals and be knocked out straight away in those.
Yeah,
that would be pretty tough.
Yeah, look, when you're knocked out of the bottom 8 finals, that's a terrible feeling.
That can happen if you're in a decent league. There's some decent players around.
Oh, yes, no, it's no slight on anybody that's ended up in that position. So let's talk about, you know, guys that are in the position where in their final 3 weeks of the year, whether because there's still a genuine chance at the overall prize, which I know a number of Coaches Panel listeners are, or your leagues, whether it be a cash league, a work league, a mates league, you're a genuine chance at winning it. With those final few trades we have left, who are some guys, Fox, that we should be looking out for, or teams to come up against that we should be looking to keep in our minds?
Do you want to go line by line?
Yeah, if you've got some, let me know what you got, man.
Why don't we just get the rucks out of the way early?
Let's do the rucks.
That's simple, isn't it? Gorn and Grundy and maybe Westhoff at F7.
Oh, don't do that, Fox. See,
that would be the perfect, you know, wouldn't it?
See, I'm not in SuperCoach Gorn. Yes, I'm all on that. In Dream Team and AFL Fantasy, while Bruce plays, that ceiling of Gorn being the dominant guy.
Okay. I've got my SuperCoach glasses on.
Yeah, so which is fine. It's good.
I'll take.
No. Yeah. I like the glasses. Keep them on, please. But yes.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I think it is. But in Dream Team or AFL Fantasy, look, Rowan Marshall in AFL Fantasy, where he's got ruck status. I like that as a bit more of a unique head-to-head against Gawn. I think in SuperCoach you could still even look at a Todd Goldstein. Patreons, if you want to check out, is something that got posted for you earlier today. We go in depth about that. He is the most informed ruckman in SuperCoach, Todd Goldstein, outside of Brodie Grundy right now. So there's options there, is what I'm saying. But the rucks, yes, from a seasonal perspective, Grundy and Gawn are the best two. But they play each other this week. I'm intrigued to see how that matchup goes. Last time, Gawn got the better of him. But to be fair, Grundy was almost laid out in that game.
They might play off each other.
Look, we talk about this again.
It's hard to know.
I've mentioned our Patreons a couple of times because they're great supporters of what we do, but they get a weekly round review podcast for our premium level Patreons. And something I talked about on the most recent one is what Melbourne should be doing at this time of the year. What do you think the D's should be doing? Should they be putting their stars out to pasture? Should they be backing in, trying to get the best draft pick? Should they be trying to, let's not call it tanking because it's not what it is, but should they be experimenting with players in roles and giving kids opportunities and putting away guys like Gawn to just secure their 2020?
Absolutely. May should be almost put
cotton-wooled.
Like Marty Hall's in the reserve. I think he might have played. He's been injured, but
he has been injured.
He has been playing twos. He definitely was last week.
Sure.
And playing very well. I'd say he definitely has to come back.
Give him another crack, sort of thing.
Week. But yeah, guys like Gawn, if they're tired, they've got nothing to it. They've got more to
to lose.
Yeah, being in that top two draft picks because we know
Rowell and Anderson.
Rowell and Anderson are the absolute two.
Anderson would be the one for them too. They don't need another Rowell, ball-winning beast. They want the class and skills and outside speed of an Anderson. That's their target.
I know they don't like the word tanking.
No, it's not tanking.
It's not.
It's experimenting with your list to maximise learnings for 2020 and beyond.
Yeah.
This feels like a work in publicity, doesn't it?
And getting a good fixture.
Yes, well, they're going to get that no matter what
they'll
they
definitely
do.
Get that, won't they? Because they definitely won't finish outside the bottom.
The bottom five, yeah. They're locked in the bottom five. Yeah. Like where they are, they're Carlton and Sydney are at 24 points, which is 4 points clear, but they got a worse percentage. Look, it's pretty safe to say that Gold Coast, Melbourne, Carlton are pretty safely bottom five. You'd probably say Sydney, are there too, given their 2 games off of what St Kilda are at 14th. So you'd think that bottom 4, the order might change, but that bottom 4's there. Okay, so we've talked about the rucks. Yeah, who are some other guys or other lines that we should be really looking at that are going to give us some good scores?
All right. Defenders.
Let me tell you about defenders. If you come up against Collingwood, that's a great defensive matchup. You look at the scores of Lukosius last week. You look at the scores of Ballard. The trend's been there right across the season. Defenders score well against Collingwood. So from a reference point, that's Melbourne this week. The following week, that's Adelaide. That could be really crucial for guys like a Rory Laird rolling through there. There's not a heap of people outside of... I know Salem's a defensive listed player for us as fantasy coaches, but he's not really playing in defence. But, maybe a draft pick like a Michael Hibbard, it could be handy. And then in the grand final round, that's North Melbourne. So maybe you're looking for a waiver wire pickup of a Jasper Pittard, for example, or a Scotty Thompson or a Robbie Tarrant or something like that. So we are seeing this trend. That's Melbourne are playing that way. Collingwood play Essendon. So, McKenna, might be the option. So that's a trend that we've seen across the year. It continued on last week of defenders against Collingwood are scoring considerably better than their average. Really, it's only Laird and Miller that are probably going to get a kick that are popular still.
Yeah, Tommy Lynch had day out,
yeah, and that's the thing is we're also seeing forwards against Collingwood, especially key forwards, score very, very well. They, Scharenberg's back in and Roughhead are kind of their keys, but that's Melbourne don't really have a tall forward option at the moment. It's Bruce and Fritsch. It could be good news for people that are running the gauntlet with Tex Walker in a daily fantasy, and then maybe more a McKernan and a hooker combination through there. So nothing hugely crazy fantasy relevant, but there's some ones certainly through there. And then I think the real obvious pick, like the mulligan, if we're using golf terms for everyone, is players that take on Gold Coast, especially midfielders and forwards, dominate them. So that's Brisbane this week. That's good news for, you know what, who'd be a nice little pick? Mitch Robinson. He would be not too bad as a little unique rolling through there. He's not going to hurt you, but I don't mind that. Then the Gold Coast Suns come up against Hawthorn. That's a nice little preliminary final matchup for you. And then their final round is against GWS. That's going to be a tasty one for Taranto, Whitfield. Kelly will be back by then. Okay. Jeremy Cameron will have a field day for super coaches that are just holding on to him. That's a nice little one. Zach Williams. He's an interesting one, isn't he? He and Brodie Smith both had a real drastic role change over the past month. Williams by necessity with Cornelio and Kelly out injured. Smith more by the Crows just looking to find a way to get some speed and class higher up the ground. Coaches that have stayed with them. Now in SuperCoach I understand holding both of them. But Dream Team and fantasy coaches that have held both of them have got a nice twist of luck, haven't they, this past month?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot went off Brodie Smith early, didn't they?
Yeah, they might have got 6-8 weeks in and thought, that's it, he's done his job and I'm away. And when Zach Williams got injured, that's when people pivoted away from him. But if for whatever reason, both of their past months have been very, very good. Any other specific players you've got for us before we do get to a couple of Patreon questions?
I do like Basher Hurley.
I know you like Bash. He's not as expensive as he was a couple of months ago either, too. So you're still paying top dollar for him.
Last three round average 115
in SuperCoach. Yeah, it's very good.
He likes the G.
He loves the G, mate.
8 of the 9 tons have been at the G
in SuperCoach. Yeah. Very, very similar in AFL Fantasy too.
He's got Carlton next week. I think that will be a good
Carlton, West Coast, and
West Coast might
Brisbane.
Be a little bit.
What's interesting about West Coast is I did start to notice a little bit of a trend prior to Mark Hutchings' injury. Is instead of tagging in the midfield, he started to tag the run and gun player off half back. Now, I know Short's probably a little bit more of that more damaging ball user and has a little bit more damaging run. That's no slight on Hooley. Of course, that's just saying what the quality player Short is. But I do think Hooley, if he continues on to get that much opportunity and ball, maybe Hutchings goes there. Maybe.
He does get that space.
He does get into space at the G.
And space means +6s.
Yeah, exactly right, which is very good. And then the final round, I'm most excited about, of all the games left to go in the year, I'm most excited about Brisbane-Richmond round 23. Because if Brisbane are going to, they're a genuine premiership threat, let's be honest. Yeah. But if you can knock off Richmond at the G,
that'd be huge.
That'd be huge. Both for confidence for them to think they're it, but also for other teams to think they can beat Richmond. So
that's going to be an interesting game because that's going to be probably the difference between getting a home final. For
either of those teams. Yeah, absolutely. Brisbane have got the percentage matchup this week, and that's what they need. They need that big percentage boost against Gold Coast, and they should get that 50, 60, 70-point win through there at least. Unfortunately, Gold Coast are just really tired. They've got great kids that are going to be very, very good. And then it starts to, the week following, it's Geelong up there. If Geelong continue on their current form trend, they should get that done.
Yeah, I think Geelong might be.
And then it becomes, as long as they're at least competitive at the G, they'll hold that second spot. Because right now on the ladder, they find themselves a game clear of Richmond. You'd think the Tigers would probably win their next two.
Richmond won't mind playing. I think out of winning records, I think they might hold at the moment the current second best in the league against Richmond over Brisbane. I think is the second
best.
That's
a good sign.
I think they've won about 12 in a row. I think Adelaide have the leading
against against Gold Coast. Yeah. So that's not the greatest one, but look, a streak is a streak. So you take.
They got a huge streak against Brisbane.
Yeah, no, they do. Look, for Tigers fans, they've got Blues this week. They should be able to put that away. Another, and great 2 tests for the Tigers. Is West Coast and Brisbane at the G. That's a great combination for us as a general footy public, seeing what could be a couple of nice little snippets of what September looks like early, with some important sides.
What time?
Neath. Neither of them are 4:35 games.
Thank God.
One is a 1:10 game at the G next round, and then one is a 3:20 game on the Sunday.
Okay.
So mate, you can breathe easy. Any other players before we move on? Bashahuli, you've talked about, you like him.
Yeah, that's probably most of them are well owned.
Oh, look, for me, if you don't know Toby Green, he's the guy right now that is the most informed forward.
Maybe what would you do with Sicily? What that might be. That could be
what do we do with Sicily? There is a question about who they trade him to. For me, in AFL Fantasy, easy trade. Get rid of him.
Yep.
Dream Team, it's worth the depending on what your focus is always the caveat. Because he's playing key defender, he's not being that intercept option for us anymore. I know he's got a favourable matchup, not this week so much, but next week against the Gold Coast Suns. This week's quite a difficult matchup in terms of Jeremy Cameron's expected back, at least at this stage in the week. Himmelberg is another key forward that they've got to keep an eye on rolling through there. They don't lack for key forward tall, so he's going to need to play tall. And then again, in the final round, it's West Coast. They don't lack for talls either. So for me, if it's SuperCoach, I'd still feel okay to hold him. It's always the preference. If you've got more than 2 trades, get rid of him. Even there. But in Dream Team and Fantasy, I think he needs to go if you've got the trade.
Yeah, probably on that line too. If you've got 3 trades, that would be your third last trade.
Yeah. Again, if you're going for overall rankings, you got to get rid of him because he's just outside of that game against Collingwood. And as we've seen, defenders against Collingwood score incredibly well.
How many weeks ago was it against Collingwood where
he's out marking Mason Cox? But again, it backs up that trend we talked about earlier of defenders against Collingwood score well. Unfortunately, we all just fell into the trap, or a large portion of the community fell in the trap going, he's underpriced, he's cheap, he's bounced back. No, he just got a favourable matchup. So a nice little learning for us there, for those of us that made that.
Another mistake.
A learning opportunity, Fox. Look at me from trying to be positive in everything. Look, they're there, but Green's the one in the forward line if you don't have him. Josh Kelly, if he comes back, it's got risk associated to it, but he's a captaincy option. I do like him as a pickup through there. Anyone coming up against Gold Coast, I really like as an option. And so there's a fair few options to kind of look at for us there.
Yeah, my big dogs would be in the forward line, Toby Green and Rowan Marshall if you don't have them.
Yep.
I think those 2 would be standouts.
They're the ones for you?
Yeah, if you don't bother going Tom Lynch, you've missed the boat on Tommy J. Lynch.
We're too far gone now?
Yeah, way too far gone. Well, mids, Adam Treloar. What do you think about Adam Treloar?
I like him. I just think you're spending too much money on him. I'd go and get Steel Sidebottom, who's got, not as big a ceiling, but has certainly got the low ownership and got the same matchups. So
I don't know.
Not for you, Fox.
Maybe last week it was, but that
Melbourne.
I know he only played
Adelaide.
He only played Gold Coast last week, but
Melbourne, Adelaide, Essendon. It's a nice little run for him in terms of scores against midfielders. He's not going to get tagged in any of those.
Yeah, Collingwood have got the good run, haven't they?
Yeah, for midfielders, I like it.
They've got the fixture, haven't they? For
West Coast is not too bad either. Richmond is certainly not as easily giving up the points as they used to, but still certainly the midfielders is the place to go against them.
Yeah. How's it? We're still on that same sort of subject.
Sure.
How's this for numbers?
There we go.
150.
Yep.
148. 142. Now this isn't Smith's batting average.
No, it's not.
Coming up in the Ashes, or he's passed. But we're 116, 120, 120, 153, 155. That's the last 8 tons in a row by Jack McRae in SuperCoach.
It's pretty comparable to in AFL Fantasy since coming off the multi-buy rounds, and there was talk amongst the fantasy community to trade him during the multi-buy round. And look, he was struggling. He was coming off the back of really only 1 ton in the past 4 or 5 weeks. But since the multi-buy rounds in AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam, similar numbers. He's come in with a 140, 180, 135, 106, 110, 132, 127, 151.
Crazy numbers, isn't it? And if you haven't got him...
Oh, boy.
He did it.
And you could have got him real cheap.
Yeah,
at the multi-buy round.
That was the week, wasn't it?
That was the time to pounce. That's a missed opportunity through there.
Fortunately, that's not on my mistake.
No, it's not. But it is that learning where sometimes we need to back a player's history. And maybe that's the weird split of a year is at the buy rounds, Brayshaw looked like he was coming good. Angus Brayshaw, Jackson Macrae didn't look like he was coming good in terms of scoring. However, the role was still there for Macrae. He was still playing midfield. He was still getting it. It's just it wasn't translating to fantasy scores, whereas they've almost gone the other way since the multi-buy round. Sometimes we just need to back a premium in, knowing they've still got the right role. They're going to come good. And, well, if you picked Macrae up at the buy round, well done.
And the way he's tracking, he's probably going to hit his price. He's going to start off again next year at the similar price.
Yeah, well, he's got potentially a couple of taggers over the next 2 weeks. I do think Bontempelli. It's Essendon and then GWS. It looks like De Boer will be back by that time. But I think De Boer goes to the best, most damaging midfielder, which is Bontempelli for them. And Essendon, they might send him to Macrae. But look, probably they'll try to go head-to-head with him there. And then that final round against the Crows, well, that could be a field day because the Crows don't tag in the midfield. So that could be a nice little captaincy option for us through there.
Yep. Actually, one guy that's gone more tons in a row. Now, I don't know if this is allowed, but from what I can read here, Dunkley might have gone 10 tons in a row. Mm-hmm. Can you count the 202 as 2?
Oh, no.
And the 88, cancel that out? And put the 2 tons, and then he's got 10 in a row. Can you do that?
You're allowed to do that if you're allowed to count people's injured scores out of their rolling averages, which you're not.
So then he hasn't got 10 in a row.
No, he's not.
Okay.
But he's averaged a considerable amount.
That might be different.
Yeah, it's a little different through there.
Right, no, I just thought I'd throw that in.
No, all right, fair enough. We'll throw that in, mate, and wrap that bad boy up. All right, let's look at wrapping up the episode with a couple of our Patreon questions. Just a couple have snuck through because we tried to answer as many of them through the building of the podcast as we could. And a really simple question. It's an AFL fantasy question, Fox. I'll throw it to you. I'll tell you the ownership numbers of these two guys and their prices. Dion Prestia is a name. Carlton this week, so that's handy. Averaging 98, but really going at 111 in the past 3. He's going to set you back $718. And he's got an ownership percentage of just 5.6. Patreon member Kyle Brett wants to know, should I pick him or should I go and pick a Mitch Duncan? 7.9% ownership. Comparable price too, because he's going to set you back at 713,000, but averaging just the 99.7 in his last 3.
Prestia at the G.
Yes.
Cochin's out for another couple of weeks.
Yes.
I think. So that sort of might reinforce it a little bit more.
That one kind of makes that decision for you pretty easily.
I think Presti's.
All right. And then Travis wants to know, is Supercoach question, he's got the Sicily dilemma. 2 trades left. He's through to the prelim in his cash leagues. So that seems to be the focus. So he's got the week off. So he's got that week to kind of watch and look here. So it's not desperate needs this week, but it's an important one. He's worried he'll keep losing cash, though, this week, which is certainly a valid concern, the way that he's going. Currently in his team, Sicily's priced at 424,800. He's got 86,900 in the bank. And this is what his defensive lineup is. Lloyd, Williams, Hooley, Smith, and Laird. He does not have enough money to go and get Lockie Whitfield. He's short of cash to go and get Lockie.
What's he got enough money for?
Well, he's probably got, he's certainly got enough to go to a Tom Stewart. More than comfortably got the money to go there. If we're talking about in-form defenders right now, though, Tom Stewart over the year is probably the one there. But the most informed defenders right now, if you really want to go crazy...
How's Hunter Clark?
Well, Hunter Clark is one of the most informed ones, but the most informed over the past 5 weeks is Nick Newman at 523.
He could be injured.
he could. Well, he doesn't have the money to get him anyway in a straight trade. He's already got Basher Hooley. He'd stretch, but he'd just get to Darcy Byrne-Jones. He's averaging 108 in his past 5 with a 1% ownership. That would be unique. Then the next, this is starting to get crazy, Mark Blickavs.
No.
Okay.
No, he's up and down.
Cade Simpson and Shannon Hearn he can afford. Simo's coming off the back of a 89 last week, a 90 for Shannon Hearn. He could afford Salem, Crisp,
Chris, what format is it?
It's for SuperCoach.
I wouldn't go Crisp in SuperCoach.
Okay. What about
Hunter Clark?
Hunter Clark
where's he priced? He would have gone up a fair bit.
He has gone up a fair bit, but he's $4.19, so he's going to make money off that trade.
What's he been churning out the last couple? Because he's got Freo, Carlton, and Swans.
An average of 82 in his last 3, 86 in his last 5. A little bit disappointing last week against the Crows with the 67. Prior to that, it was an 81, 98, and a 120.
I think I'd want more.
I'd be wanting a little bit more than Hunter Clark. He's got money to basically get up to for 500,000. He's already got Hooley, who's the most informed defender over the last 3.
That's a big tick.
Doesn't have enough to get Newman. Doesn't have enough to get Whitfield. Already has Brodie Smith. Cade Simpson's the next most informed, but that's boosted by that big game against the Crows.
Been a lot of defenders that have fallen down.
There has. Mark
injured.
Blix is averaging 99 in his last 3, mate. 96, 104, 97, 79, 98, 115. I'm just saying, Brisbane and Carlton in the last 2.
Hearn's a bit proppy.
Yeah, Hearn could be a little bit proppy. If you want unique, look, if you're going for a cash league, Blix is probably too crazy for you. But I like crazy. And my friend, that's crazy because less than 4,000 coaches own him in SuperCoach. Good luck to you, mate. Let me know how you go with that. But Fox, you'd be trying to spend a little bit more money and going on something a bit safer is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think you'd want to be looking at closer to 90, 95.
All right, fair enough too. Hey, mate, appreciate your work as we've...
Is that it?
Mate, we're done. Mate, what do you mean it's done? It's 47 minutes. What are you talking about? Are we
So
done?
many questions?
Well, like I said, I built the rest of the podcast around questions that we got. Try to help people out. Those the most specific questions we got that we wanted to answer for people. So we're here to help.
Fair enough. So that's it.
Yeah, mate.
Till next week. Well, how many weeks we got?
2 weeks left to go after this one. Next week.
Oh, so there's only one. How many more weeks?
2
podcasts.
2 more podcasts to go.
Okay,
3 rounds of fantasy
go.
footy.
Right.
Next week we're going to look at 2020 gaining and losing DPPs plus answering your questions. Then the final week, well, we're going to bring a full year review club by club. Plenty of stuff still happening over at coachespanel.tv as well as these podcasts, mate. As always, a pleasure.
Sounds good, and good evening or good morning if you're listening.
Or good afternoon,
yeah.
Depending on where you are in the world and the time you're listening. Good luck this week. A massive thank you for your support in 2019. Plenty of great content still to come as we look up to wrap up your fantasy footy season. I hope your captain kills it for you this week. I hope your uniques fire, and I hope you get through to that all-important preliminary final round in your league matchups. And if you're going for overall rankings, I hope you crack your best ranking ever.